dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, let the world outside fade. Once we begin, there's no turning back. This isn't just a story. It's a question haunting generations, a mystery buried beneath silence, denial, and fear. It begins with a crash. A remote ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. Something falls from the sky. Not a plane, not a balloon, not anything we were told existed. What followed was a swift, covert cleanup, then a press release. We have recovered a flying disc. Hours later, a correction. It was just a weather balloon. The world moved on, but not everyone forgot. In 1984, a man receives a package. No return address. Inside, film negatives. He develops them and finds chilling documents. Classified, stamped top secret, 12 names, a presidential signature, a title, Majestic 12, a secret committee, allegedly formed by President Harry Truman to investigate, recover, and conceal extraterrestrial contact. 12 powerful men, military leaders, intelligence officers, scientists tasked with managing the greatest secret in human history. But is it real? Or a hoax so elaborate it hijacked our imaginations? If a hoax, why does it align with real history, real people, and real secrets the government hid? If aliens crashed in Roswell, who cleaned it up? Studied the wreckage, silenced witnesses, kept the story straight for decades. This isn't about little green men. It's about power, fear, and the machinery of secrecy that erases truth before your eyes. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. This is Majestic 12, Chapter 1. The crash at Roswell. The desert doesn't speak. Not really. It whispers. Perhaps in the way wind slips between rocks, or how tumbleweeds roll across open emptiness like forgotten thoughts. But in July of 1947, the New Mexico desert broke its silence, not with a voice, but with a crash. It began on a ranch just outside Corona, New Mexico, roughly 75 miles from the small town of Roswell. The land was rugged, sunburnt, vast, a place where men like William Mac Brazel lived quiet lives, measured not in headlines or history, but in fence posts and weather. A man of the land, not a soldier or scientist. Brazel was a father and worker, accustomed to solitude and silence. On July 4th, Independence Day, while much of the country celebrated with fireworks and parades, Brazel was tending to his sheep after a fierce summer storm. The storm had been intense flashes of light. Thunder that rolled like the sky was tearing open. In its aftermath, he found debris scattered across a wide stretch of field. It wasn't branches or fence wire, nor the aftermath of lightning, but something else. Pieces of silvery material, strange, thin, and light. Some crumpled but snapped back into shape when folded or bent. Other fragments bore marking symbols, perhaps etched like hieroglyphics of no known language. The material didn't burn, melt, or tear easily. It wasn't wood, metal, or anything Brazel could name. At first, Brazel kept quiet, gathering what he could and taking it home. But word travels fast in small towns. He showed neighbors the odd, flexible foil, the sticks that weren't sticks, and threads that didn't behave like thread. Unsure of what he'd found, he reported it to the local sheriff, George Wilcox, who contacted the nearby Roswell Army Airfield, home of the 509th Bomb Group, the only unit in the world at the time equipped with nuclear weapons. The military responded swiftly, too swiftly, some would say. Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer trained to investigate strange phenomena, arrived with other personnel. According to Marcel, the debris field stretched nearly 3/4 of a mile. It wasn't the wreckage of a balloon or plane, but scattered, unburned pieces with no crater or explosion. They loaded the debris onto trucks, and Brazel was detained for his own protection at the base for several days. Meanwhile, the military issued a bold press release. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc. It was printed in the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947, with the headline, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. The news spread nationwide, teetering on the edge of revelation. But the next day, Brigadier General Roger, commanding officer of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, called a press conference. Posing with debris baraba foil and wooden Stixie, declared it a weather balloon, simple and harmless. Major Marcel was photographed with the same pieces but later swore it wasn't what he recovered. The real debris, he claimed, was taken elsewhere and the photos were staged deception. Why the sudden change from announcing a flying disc to a misidentified balloon? Why stage photographs with material that didn't match eyewitness descriptions? The press release vanished. Newspapers moved on, and the story was buried. But Roswell lingered in living rooms, late-night conversations, and whispered recollections. Years later, Jesse Marcel spoke openly. Convinced what he recovered was not from Earth, he described memory metal that bent, crumpled, and reshaped instantly, beams with strange purple symbols, and being ordered to stay silent. Other stories emerged. An undertaker asked about child-sized coffins, a nurse who saw bodies at the base hospital, and others threatened to keep quiet. Mac Brazel became withdrawn, possibly paid or scared, and never spoke publicly again. In later decades, skeptics claimed it was Project Mogul, a secret, high-altitude balloon to detect Soviet nuclear tests, explaining the confusion and military lies. But if it was a balloon, why the press release, secrecy, or stories of bodies? And if it wasn't, what crashed that night? Roswell became more than an event, a symbol, a rupture where the truth slipped out and was hurriedly covered. It wasn't the beginning of the UFO phenomenon, but the first crack in the official wall, through which strange lights and questions poured for decades. Some claimed a secret group, Majestic 12, formed that year by President Truman, tasked not with discovery but suppression. Was it real, or a well-crafted deception? That's where our story turns next. Let's continue. Chapter 2. The Birth of a Cover-Up. If something truly fell from the stars, how would they hide it? In a world of radios and newspapers, in a nation that had just stared into the mushroom cloud of Hiroshima, where fear was currency and silence was survival, how do you bury something that large? How do you hide the impossible? To understand the answer, you have to go back, not to the desert of New Mexico, but to the conference rooms of Washington, to the dawn of a new kind of war. The Cold War had not yet been declared, but it had already begun in 1947. The United States had emerged from World War II victorious, but anxious, with the world split into camps. The West, led by America, and the East, led by the Soviet Union. Two superpowers, two ideologies, and one looming, invisible threat. The bomb. With the dropping of atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, humanity had entered an age of extinction by its own hand. Behind every diplomatic cable, treaty, and handshake was the paranoia of annihilation. The CIA was formed that year, as was the Air Force, splitting off as its own branch. The National Security Act was passed, creating a culture of classified information. Secrecy wasn't just policy. It became instinct, an operating system for power. In this climate of escalating distrust, strange things began appearing in the skies. In 1947 alone, There were over 850 reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in the United States. Pilots, farmers, and policemen, people from every walk of life, saw disc-shaped crafts, objects moving at impossible speeds, and lights maneuvering with intelligence. The government had to respond, but not openly. In January 1948, they formed Project Sign to investigate flying saucers. Behind the scenes, Project Sign was more than a curiosity desk. It was intelligence gathering, file building, and behavioral tracking, studying not just the phenomena but the people reporting it. One early report, known as the Estimate of the Situation, tentatively concluded that some UFOs may be of interplanetary origin. This conclusion never made it to the public and reportedly horrified Air Force brass. General Hoyt Vandenberg, then Chief of Staff of the Air Force, allegedly rejected the report outright, claiming insufficient proof, and the files were destroyed. Project Sign was replaced by Project Grudge in 1949, with a clear objective: debunk, dismiss, discredit, where sin had been open to possibilities. Grudge assumed hostility not from the skies, but from within, viewing UFO witnesses as hoaxers or security threats. Psychologists were consulted, not to understand UFOs, but to control the narrative, making public perception part of national security. In 1952, Project Blue Book replaced Grudge, becoming the longest-running official UFO investigation by the US government. Thousands of cases were catalogued, most explained, some not, but the goal remained: manage belief, diffuse the extraordinary, control the story. Meanwhile, a darker, invisible layer was forming. Majestic 12, allegedly created in the summer of 1947, just after Roswell. Majestic 12, or MJ-12, was said to be a secret committee, hand-picked by President Harry Truman. 12 men, military officers, scientists, intelligence operatives, the best or most loyal, had a mission of containment, keeping the lid on forever. The name surfaced publicly in the 1980s through anonymous documents, mailed to UFO researchers, official-looking memos, briefing papers, and an executive order detailing crashed craft, recovered bodies, and reverse engineering programs, all hidden under the highest classification. Skeptics called it a hoax, and the FBI declared the documents bogus. But others questioned the government's intense interest, surveillance, and classified files. Decades later, some believe the MJ-12 documents were disinformation, a planted story to muddy the waters, a cover-up of a cover-up. If something crashed in 1947 and the military recovered alien technology, how could they reveal it? Would the public accept it? Would the Soviet Union use it against us? Would religions crumble? Or would we panic? In 1950, Canadian engineer Will Smith wrote a now declassified memo claiming he contacted the U.S. Department of Defense about UFO research and was told UFOs were the most highly classified subject in the United States government, even higher than the eight. This statement, if true, reveals not aliens but fear not of what was out there, but what would happen if we knew. Secrecy isn't just about hiding facts, it's about controlling minds. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the US government was mastering this through psychological warfare doctrines, like Operation Mockingbird and Project MK, designed to shape public opinion and bend reality quietly. The UFO phenomenon was the perfect battlefield. Confusing, unprovable, emotional, too real to dismiss, too weird to confirm, allowing the truth to hide in plain sight. President Truman never publicly acknowledged MJ-12, but signed National Security Council Memorandum 68, a blueprint for Cold War secrecy, emphasizing psychological, political, and economic warfare to maintain America's advantage. Within this mindset, keeping non-human intelligence secret would be mandatory. By 1953, President Dwight D. Eisenhower took office, and the UFO phenomena reportedly intensified with sightings over Washington, D.C., jet scrambles, and radar locks. Official explanations cited temperature inversions, stars, or misidentification, while Majestic 12, if it existed, operated without oversight, answering only to the Oval Office, or perhaps not even that. If such a secret existed, would 12 men suffice to guard it? Would they create a shadow bureaucracy involving contractors, aerospace firms, and scientists sworn to silence under penalty of treason? Would they reverse engineer technology, experiment, and lie? How deep would the deception go? By the time Project Blue Book shut down in 1969, the official line was clear. UFOs pose no threat, show no evidence of being extraterrestrial, and warrant no further study. Yet, the Freedom of Information Act later revealed hundreds of pages of classified material, radar logs, eyewitness reports, pilot testimonies filled with contradictions and discrepancies. The question of Majestic 12 persists. A ghost group, a phantom, always present like a shadow that moves when no one else does. So where does that leave us? With a crashed object, a swift military cover-up, a world on edge, and a culture where truth became a weapon. They didn't just bury the answers, they buried the questions. If MJ-12 was real, it may not have been a cover-up of aliens, but of how deep the deception goes. The deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. The next chapter isn't just about hidden craft or secret committees, it's about people. Men and women who came forward with stories they shouldn't have known, and lives that were never the same again. Let's continue. Chapter 3. Majestic 12 is born. A brown envelope, no return address, postmarked Albuquerque, New Mexico, sent to a quiet home in Burbank, California. The year was 1984. Inside the envelope was a roll of film undeveloped, anonymous, unexplained. The man who received it, Jaime Shandara, a TV producer and UFO enthusiast, and the film he held in his hand would set off one of the most enduring controversies in the entire history of UFO investigations. When the negatives were developed, they revealed photographs of documents, old documents, government documents, and on the first page, 2 words that would haunt and captivate generations of seekers: Majestic 12. The documents appeared to be a briefing prepared for President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952. They described a secret group of 12 men, scientists, military leaders, intelligence officials formed by President Harry Truman in 1947. Their mission: to investigate, contain, and exploit extraterrestrial technology retrieved from UFO crash sites. Starting with Roswell, it was the ultimate conspiracy. Spelled out in crisp, cold black and white, the paper trail began on a letterhead marked "Top Secret, Magic Eyes Only." That phrase, magic, was a clever contraction of Majestic. The documents claimed that in the wake of the Roswell crash, the documents didn't just claim a secret committee. They told a story. A narrative stretching from Roswell to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, from retrieved alien bodies to cover-ups that reached into the highest levels of power. They detailed the recovery of 4 alien corpses, described as small humanoid beings, and the transportation of crash debris to secure military installations. They hinted at continued encounters, at growing awareness, and, perhaps most troubling of all, they described an intentional campaign of silence, deception, and containment. For Shandara and his research partner, Bill Moore, this was the Holy Grail. Bill Moore was no amateur. He had co-authored the 1980 bestseller The Roswell Incident, one of the first books to bring the crash into mainstream discussion. Moore had already spent years cultivating insider sources, people in the shadows of government and intelligence. Men who told stories they shouldn't have known. Some of those sources, Moore later claimed, hinted that something like MJ-12 existed. But until the arrival of the envelope, there was no proof. No paper trail, no smoking gun. Now, suddenly, there was, or was there? In 1985, Moore and Chandara began quietly investigating the documents' authenticity. They didn't release them publicly for 3 years. During that time, they searched national archives. They interviewed relatives of the named individuals. They scoured military libraries for language, phrasing, formatting. They didn't find hard confirmation, but they didn't find disproof either. And in 1987, the documents were finally released through the work of another researcher, Stanton Friedman. Friedman was a nuclear physicist turned full-time UFO investigator, highly respected in the field, rational, methodical, grounded. He went public with the MJ-12 documents, arguing that while they might be controversial, they demanded serious investigation. The UFO community erupted. Some saw the MJ-12 documents as final validation, the missing piece of the puzzle. Government insiders had always hinted at such a group. Here, at last, was the evidence. But others were skeptical from the beginning. Why had the documents surfaced through unknown channels? Why were they photos of documents rather than the originals? And why were there small inconsistencies in formatting, punctuation, even spacing? The most disputed document was a one-page memo dated September 24, 1947. It appeared to be signed by President Harry Truman himself, authorizing the formation of Majestic 12. But was the signature authentic? Analysts compared it to known Truman signatures. Some said yes, some said no. Others said it was a direct cut and paste from a different, real Truman letter suggesting forgery. It matched government documents from the 1940s. Mostly, but not entirely. The memo referred to the Secretary of Defense, a term not officially used until after the National Security Act of 1947. At the time, the title was Secretary of War, a small detail but significant. Then there was the Eisenhower briefing document, dated November 18, 1952. It read like a classified intelligence summary but with oddly dramatic phrasing. Some researchers claimed the writing style was too modern, too conversational for the 1950s. Others pointed to inconsistencies in military formatting. Still, none of the names were fictional. All 12 men were real. Their positions matched. Their timelines overlapped. Whoever wrote these documents, they knew history. Deeply, intimately, too intimately, some argued. In 1988, the FBI was quietly pulled in. After being contacted by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the FBI launched an inquiry into the MJ-12 documents. Their conclusion: bogus. But even that declaration raised questions. The FBI wasn't claiming the content was false, only that the documents themselves didn't come through official channels. They had no provenance, no chain of custody. The debate over MJ-12 documents has continued for decades. Supporters claim that no hoaxer could have written them in 1984 without access to obscure historical facts, some of which hadn't been declassified yet. They point to the complexity of the documents, the historical accuracy of personnel movements, and the eerie alignment with later revealed intelligence practices. Critics argue that if it was a hoax, it was a brilliant one crafted by someone with deep knowledge of government structure, maybe even someone inside the system, which raises a strange possibility. What if the MJ-12 documents were both fake and true? What if they were a form of disinformation, a leak by design? to obscure real programs behind the noise of controversy, to distract, to mislead, to poison the well. There are those who believe MJ12 never existed, that it was invented by Morshandara or someone close to them, that it was a publicity stunt gone nuclear. There are others who believe MJ12 absolutely did exist and still does, under a different name, that it morphed into a permanent substructure beneath the intelligence community, a group not bound by oversight or law, answering only to itself, and still tasked with one mission: contain the truth about non-human intelligence. Over the years, more documents have surfaced, some clearly hoaxed, some harder to dismiss. The waters have been muddied, intentionally, perhaps, but the legacy of MJ12 remains. Whether it was real, imagined, or something in between, the idea took root. It gave shape to the fears whispered since Roswell. It put names on the unknown, and it showed how deeply belief and secrecy intertwine. Because the power of MJ12 isn't in the paper, it est in the question it dares to ask. What if everything we know is just what we re-allowed to know? And what happens when the people who decide that no longer answer to anyone? In the next chapter, we leave the paper trail behind and listen to voices. Voices that weren't supposed to speak. Pilots, scientists, agents, people who came forward with stories that don't match the official line and who paid a heavy price. Let's meet the whistleblowers. Let's hear what they weren't supposed to say. Chapter 4. Whistleblowers and the Deep State. They came forward and they paid the price. In the world of intelligence, there's a saying that echoes behind locked doors. He who knows doesn't talk. He who talks doesn't know. But sometimes someone does talk, and when they do, the price is almost always the same. Ridicule, discrediting, exile, or worse. In this chapter, we meet the voices that shouldn't exist. The people who claim to have glimpsed behind the curtain, inside the engine room of secrecy. Some were military officers, others government scientists. A few never had a badge, but say they were recruited all the same. Together, their stories form a fractured mirror, a reflection of something vast, hidden, and dangerous. Bob Lazar, the reluctant physicist. In 1989, a soft-spoken physicist named Bob Lazar sat down for an interview with investigative reporter George Knapp in Las Vegas. He wore sunglasses, used a fake name, and spoke in cautious tones, and then he said something that would make him a household name. I worked on alien spacecraft at a site called S4, near Area 51. Lazar claimed that he had been hired to back-engineer non-human propulsion systems, craft that didn't operate on conventional fuel or engines, but on gravity wave manipulation powered by an element then unknown to mainstream science. Element 115. His job, he said, was narrow and compartmentalized. He was only allowed to work on a small part of the craft's reactor. He wasn't told where the craft came from, but what he saw left no doubt in his mind. It wasn't made here. The story was unbelievable. And yet, Lazar accurately described the layout of Area 51 before it was publicly acknowledged to exist. He knew where the security cameras were, the shape of the hangars, the bus routes, the timing of the test flights, and how badges were color-coded. Later, declassified documents confirmed the existence of S4-like facilities along the dry lake beds of Nevada. But Lazar's story didn't stop there. He described 9 different alien craft, each with different designs. He claimed to have read briefing documents mentioning Zeta Reticuli as the origin point of these visitors, and most alarmingly, he claimed that several people had died during testing killed. Uncontrollable effects of non-human energy sources. The backlash was immediate. Lazar's educational records vanished. MIT and Caltech claimed no record of him. His employment at Los Alamos National Lab was denied, even though his name was found in a phone directory from the time. He was arrested for unrelated charges, his reputation destroyed, his name smeared across newspapers. But he never recanted. Even decades later, his story hasn't changed. And in recent years, with increased government acknowledgement of UFO phenomena, many have quietly started to wonder, what if Bob Lazar was telling the truth? Colonel Philip Corso, the man who knew too much. In 1997, an aging Army officer published a memoir titled The Day After Roswell. Its contents? Explosive. Colonel Philip J. Corso, a decorated Army intelligence officer, claimed that he had been given the task of distributing extraterrestrial technology retrieved from the Roswell crash. His job was to seed it into the hands of private industry under the guise of advanced research. According to Corso, night vision goggles, fiber optics, integrated circuits all had their origins in alien wreckage. He said it was done quietly, with plausible deniability. He called it technology laundering. Corso had served under General Arthur Trudeau at the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Division. His resume was bulletproof, his military service well documented, and yet his claims were dismissed as fantasy. Critics pointed out inconsistencies, asked for documentation, demanded proof. But Corso said nothing was documented in official files. It was all off the books. Need to know, everything went through private contractors because they didn't have to answer to Congress. Welcome to the black budget world. Area 51, the Lab of Shadows. Few places on Earth have inspired more mystery than Area 51. Located in the Nevada desert, this classified Air Force base didn't officially exist until the late 1990s. But insiders say it has existed since at least 1955. Its official purpose, testing advanced aircraft like the U-2 and SR-71. Its unofficial purpose, that depends on who you ask. Whistleblowers like Lazar and others claim that Area 51, especially sites like S4 and Papoose Lake, used for reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft. Other insiders describe massive underground facilities, isolated black labs, and compartmentalized projects where scientists don't even know what the guy next door is working on. If you ask for a list of these projects, you won't find them. They are special access programs. And beyond those, unacknowledged special access programs. Programs so secret, even the president may not be cleared to know they exist. Mind control, MK-Ultra, and psychological operations. But technology wasn't the only secret project hidden beneath black ink and red tape. During the 1950s and 60s, the CIA launched a program known as MK-Ultra. Its goal? To explore mind control, psychological manipulation, and human experimentation. Victims often, unaware, were dosed with LSD, subjected to sleep deprivation, hypnosis, and sensory torture. Some died. Many were left mentally broken. The program was exposed in the 1970s after hearings in the US Senate. But many documents had already been destroyed. MK-Ultra confirmed one chilling truth. The US government was willing to experiment on its own citizens in the name of national security. If that was allowed to happen publicly, what might be happening still? In secret, James Forrestal, Death in the Shadows. One of the original alleged members of MJ-12 was James Forrestal, America's first Secretary of Defense, a staunch anti-communist. Forrestal had access to the deepest levels of intelligence. He was involved in early UFO reports, and according to some, he knew too much. In 1949, Forrestal was hospitalized for exhaustion. Weeks later, he was found dead, having fallen from the 16th floor of the Bethesda Naval Hospital. Official cause of death, suicide, but the circumstances were strange. He had been isolated, his access restricted, his notes confiscated. He was reportedly copying passages from the Bible the night before his death. Some believe Forrestal was silenced, that he had threatened to go public not just about aliens, but about a growing shadow government taking power behind the scenes, the deep state control without consent. All these stories, Lazar, Corso, point to a central idea. That power has migrated from elected officials to a permanent, unelected infrastructure. A deep state, not a political conspiracy but a structural reality. Career intelligence officers, defense contractors, security clearance elites, operating across administrations, shielded by classification, funded by trillions in untraceable dollars. According to some estimates, the US black budget in recent decades has exceeded $50 billion per year. And no one, not Congress, not the public, knows where most of that money goes. Could alien technology be part of that puzzle? Could it explain the explosive advancement in materials science, propulsion, and computing over just a few short decades? Or are we simply inventing stories to explain our own ignorance? Need to know compartmentalized truth. In the world of high secrecy, information is not shared freely. It's compartmentalized. You only know what you need to know to do your job. No one sees the whole picture, even within MJ-12. If it existed, each member might have been kept in isolation. Each lab, each base, each project operating in a vacuum. This makes leaks nearly impossible. And it makes lies nearly indistinguishable from truth. Because when no one knows everything, no one can blow the whole whistle. Some whistleblowers have recanted, others have vanished. Many have died suddenly, strangely, silently, but their testimonies linger, not as proof, but as questions. Lazar, Corso, Forrestal, different men, different eras, same shadow. What did they see? Why were they silenced? And what is so powerful, so unacceptable, that revealing it is treated like an act of treason? In the next chapter, we leave Earth. We examine the technology described in these testimonies, what it can do, what it might mean, and whether it suggests something terrifying, that we are not the top of the food chain, and we never were. Chapter 5, Cold War Skies, UFOs and Espionage. In the Cold War, not all objects in the sky were Soviet or human. Between 1947 and 1969, over 12,000 UFO sightings were reported to the US Air Force. At the height of Cold War, paranoia, mysterious disks, glowing orbs, and silent craft appeared on radar and in the memories of frightened witnesses from Texas to Tehran, from Nevada to Norway. Some of these sightings were explainable, others were not. But a deeper truth was hidden beneath the surface. While America looked to the skies in fear of alien visitors, a more immediate war was being waged, one of secrecy, surveillance, and psychological control. And the most powerful weapon in this war was not a missile, but a story. The UFO surge of the 1950s-60s. In the years following World War II, a strange wave swept across America. Flying saucers. In 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 disc-shaped objects moving at impossible speeds near Mount Rainier, Washington. The press seized the term flying saucer, and the modern UFO era was born. By the early 1950s, sightings had exploded. Small towns were gripped with fear. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Objects outrun jets," "Air Force puzzled." In July 1952, for 2 nights in a row, radar operators at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base detected multiple unidentified objects hovering over the U.S. Capitol building. Fighter jets were scrambled. Eyewitnesses watched in disbelief as glowing objects danced over the Capitol before disappearing into the night. The event made global headlines, and the Air Force scrambled for answers. Behind closed doors, they weren't just asking what these things were, but who was watching. Project Blue Book and the Intelligence Dilemma. In response to the growing panic, the U.S. Air Force created Project Blue Book, public face-in investigation into UFO sightings. Its goal was to collect, analyze, and explain these incidents, but declassified memos painted a different picture. Privately, the Air Force and CIA saw UFO reports as both a threat and an opportunity. The threat that mass sightings could overload communications channels and be used to mask a real Soviet attack. The opportunity that public obsession with UFOs could serve as a cover for secret US aviation programs, and so began a carefully orchestrated campaign of misinformation and redirection. U-2, SR-71, and the art of disguise. By the mid-1950s, the US was testing high-altitude spy planes at altitudes no commercial aircraft could reach. The U-2 could fly at 70,000 feet, a revolutionary height at the time. Civilians and even military pilots were stunned when they saw small, silvery objects gliding high above normal airspace with no visible engines. They reported UFOs, but in reality, they were watching test flights of America's most secret aircraft. Later came the SR-71 Blackbird, capable of Mach 3 speeds and radar evasion. To most observers, it didn't look like a plane. It looked like science fiction. But rather than correcting public perception, the CIA saw a convenient smokescreen. High-altitude testing of the U-2 led to an increase in reports of unidentified flying objects, read a declassified CIA memo. This, in turn, led the Air Force to mislead the public. The misleading wasn't a side effect, it was policy. The Robertson Panel, Engineering Public Opinion. In 1953, the CIA convened a secret meeting of top scientists and intelligence officials, known as the Robertson Panel. Their findings: UFOs were not necessarily a direct threat, but belief in UFOs was. They feared that mass hysteria could be used as a weapon, clogging air defense systems, spreading disinformation, or even turning the public against government narratives. Their recommendation: use psychological warfare techniques, engage trusted scientists and media figures, and discredit UFO belief through ridicule, skepticism, and media manipulation. In essence, don't just hide the truth, control the perception of truth. Operation Mockingbird. Owning the narrative. During this same period, the CIA quietly launched a covert operation to infiltrate and influence mainstream American media, named Project Mockingbird. Reporters at major newspapers, anchors on television, even Hollywood producers were either co-opted, recruited, or manipulated. Their job: to shape public opinion on foreign policy, domestic issues, and yes, UFOs. Stories were planted. Dissenting voices were mocked. Experts were cherry-picked. This wasn't about hiding aliens. It was about weaponizing belief. Imagine it. You witness something strange in the sky. You report it. Soon you're told you saw a weather balloon, or Venus, or a figment of your imagination. And if you insist otherwise, you're labeled a crank, a conspiracy theorist, someone not to be trusted. In this way, the CIA turned public curiosity into self-policing doubt. The ridicule became so pervasive that even Air Force pilots stopped reporting sightings, fearing for their careers. Perception management and strategic denial. Cold War strategy wasn't just about missiles, it was about controlling minds. By the 1960s, UFOs served as a dual-purpose tool, a cover story for experimental tech and a testing ground for psychological manipulation. This is what intelligence experts call perception management, the ability to seed belief. control narrative arcs, and guide public response without ever issuing a direct order, the truth was no longer hidden. It was drowned in noise. But what about the real UFOs? Here lies the paradox. While the CIA used UFOs to mask man-made aircraft, they were also tracking objects that didn't belong to either superpower. Declassified documents from the NSA, CIA, and NORAD show repeated instances of objects violating US airspace, performing maneuvers impossible for known technology, and then disappearing at hypersonic speed. Some of these were tracked by multiple radar systems. Others were seen by trained pilots. These were not U to South, not Soviet MiGs, and definitely not Venus. So what were they? The truth may lie in the uncomfortable overlap between espionage and the unexplained. Some UFOs were mistakes, some were lies, and some were neither. But by blanketing the entire phenomenon with disinformation and ridicule, the intelligence community achieved its goal. Doubt everything. Believe nothing. Ask no questions. The legacy of cold GP war deception. Today, when someone sees something in the sky, the instinct is to reach for explanations. Drone jet, satellite, illusion. That reflex didn't happen naturally. It was taught, crafted over decades by intelligence agencies that understood a fundamental truth. A confused population is easier to control than an informed one. From the Roswell Incident to the Washington Flap, from Project Blue Book to Mockingbird, we weren't just watching the skies, we were watching ourselves through a mirror darkened by strategy and secrecy. In the next chapter, we descend even deeper. We explore the global shadow of MJ-12 and how whispers of its existence echo through NATO bases, KGB files, and deep inside the vaults of the Vatican, because the Cold War wasn't just fought on Earth, and maybe neither is the truth. Chapter 6. The Document Trail. Forgery, or Fractured Truth. What if the hoax was built on classified fact? Let's pause for a moment. Take a breath. Let your mind drift back to the late 20th century. It's the Cold War. But another war is also unfolding. A war over truth. By the 1980s, the whispers surrounding Majestic 12 had already begun to echo in certain corners of the UFO research world. In 1984, something wild went down. A bunch of old, yellowed documents were sent anonymously to a UFO researcher named Jamie. These papers would ignite one of the most enduring controversies in the history of the UFO phenomenon. These were no casual pages. They appeared to be official government memoranda, stamped with dates from the late 1940s, detailing the creation of a top-secret group called Majestic 12 or MJ-12. Their purpose? To investigate, contain, and exploit the wreckage and biological remains from an alien crash site in Roswell, New Mexico. Was this the ultimate proof, or an elaborate ruse? Let's begin where the documents did. The first leak. The envelope arrived without warning. No return address. Inside was a roll of 35mm film. When developed, the images revealed several typed pages dated, signed, and ominously stamped Top Secret, Magic Eyes Only. One of them was allegedly a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower, dated 1952, informing him of the group's existence and purpose. Another was a memorandum signed by President Truman, dated September 24, 1947, just 2 months after the Roswell Incident. It authorized the formation of MJ-12. The names listed matched 12 real historical figures. Scientists, generals, intelligence officers, powerful men, all involved in national security, nuclear weapons, or emerging intelligence networks during the late 1940s. Men like Vannevar Bush, Roscoe Hillenkoetter, James Forstall, and Donald Menzel. It seemed too perfect, And for some, that was the problem. The FBI steps in. When these documents eventually made their way into wider public attention, they didn't go unnoticed by the US government. In 1988, the Federal Bureau of Investigation conducted an official inquiry into the MJ-12 documents. Their conclusion was swift and damning. They declared the documents to be completely bogus. But here's where it gets strange. The FBI's investigation didn't go very far. They didn't attempt to interview any living relatives of the supposed MJ-12 members. They didn't trace the original sender of the film. They relied heavily on a single evaluation from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And the AFOSI, it turns out, has a long history with disinformation operations. One AFOSI agent, Richard Doty, had already been involved in spreading false UFO information to a researcher named Paul Benoit. Doty later admitted in interviews that part of his job had been to deliberately plant false information to obscure classified aerospace projects, which leads to a chilling possibility. What if the documents were meant to be found? The silence of the NSA, another agency, looms over this story like a shadow, one you rarely hear mentioned. The National Security Agency. The NSA's involvement in UFO monitoring, surveillance, and intelligence has long been suspected, but rarely confirmed. When Research Your Citizens Against UFO Secrecy sued the NSA under the Freedom of Information Act in the 1980s, the NSA admitted that it had 239 documents related to UFOs, but it refused to release them. The reason? National security. One heavily redacted document eventually released referenced intercepted communications between foreign governments, some of them about unidentified flying objects. It's not a smoking gun, but it's smoke. Debunkers versus believers. The UFO community was immediately split. Prominent researchers like Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist and one of the earliest investigators of Roswell, became a leading voice, arguing that the MJ-12 documents could be authentic, or at least partially true. He pointed to things like the signatures on the Truman memo matched against verified historical documents and the accurate details of meetings and positions held by the named individuals. But others, like Philip Klass, a skeptical journalist, dismissed MJ-12 as a fabrication. He noted the use of terms like top secret, magic, which, according to some, didn't match the classification language of the time. Then there was the typewriter, analysis, an arcane but important detail. Critics claimed the typefaces didn't match models used in government offices during that era. But every claim of forgery seemed to meet a counterclaim of government manipulation. The debate never settled. Pattern recognition, names, timelines, shadows. Let's look at the list of names again. Vannevar Bush, science advisor to FDR and Truman, oversaw the Manhattan Project's early scientific policy. James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense, died in a mysterious fall from a hospital window in 1949 while being treated for what was described as a nervous breakdown. Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the first director of the CIA. Donald Menzel, an astronomer who publicly debunked UFOs, but was secretly working with the NSA. These aren't random figures. They were all deeply embedded in national defense, intelligence, and scientific secrecy during a time of extraordinary technological transition. Even the style and content of the MJ-12 briefing documents mirror real presidential daily briefings from the Truman and Eisenhower era. So if the documents are fake, whoever faked them knew a lot. Forged truth or false lies. There's a theory that persists among some UFO historians and intelligence analysts, a middle path. What if the MJ-12 documents are deliberate disinformation, not to debunk belief, but to distract it? If the documents are fake, they may be based on real events, using real people, seeded with just enough errors to make the whole thing collapsible under scrutiny. In intelligence terms, this is called a limited hangout. You release some real information, mix it with falsehoods, and let the public discredit it for you. That way, you never have to officially deny anything. A truth never meant to be known. In a rare interview, CIA historian Gerald N. admitted that during the Cold War, the CIA used the UFO phenomenon to hide high-altitude reconnaissance missions. In other words, the UFO story was a perfect cover story. But sometimes, a cover story takes on a life of its own, and that brings us back to Majestic 12. Whether MJ-12 was real, or a myth, or something in between, its existence as an idea has shaped the public's understanding of secrecy, power, and truth. Because the deeper you look into the MJ-12 documents, the clearer one thing becomes. They were not designed for casual reading. They were designed to confuse, mislead, and maybe, just maybe, reveal, but only to those with the patience and the courage to read between the lines. In our next chapter, we follow the shadows even further. Because if Majestic 12 was real, it didn't operate in isolation. There were whispers of coordination with NATO, with foreign intelligence, even with the Vatican. Stay with us. We're going global. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Secrecy. The real power of Majestic 12 may not lie in what it did, but in what it made possible. It's one thing to form a secret committee in the shadows of Cold War paranoia. It's another thing entirely to plant a seed so deep in the public imagination that even 75 years later, people are still asking the same question. What don't they want us to know? Let's step back for a moment from the documents, from the names, from the blurred photos and conflicting testimonies, and ask, what did the idea of Majestic 12 set in motion? Let's trace its echo through the decades. The shadow evolves. From MJ-12 to PI-40, by the 1990s, researchers began noticing something strange. Majestic 12 had gone quiet, but in a newly emerging field of UFO disclosure, other names began to surface. Project Aquarius, Sigma, Magic Ops, PI-40, names whispered in classified memos, cited by whistleblowers, mentioned in obscure briefings, always just out of reach. PI-40, in particular, appeared repeatedly, allegedly a successor to MJ-12, still hidden, still compartmentalized, but now focused on technology transfer and deep black aerospace projects. Dr. Stephen Greer, a retired trauma surgeon turned disclosure advocate, claimed that PI-40 was the real operating command behind the secrecy MJ-12's reborn face, now buried under dozens of layers of NID-2 clearance. Was this evolution planned, or had the original members simply handed off the legacy to a new generation, trained in deeper silence? 2. The rise of the breakaway civilization theory. To understand what came next, we need to explore a radical idea. An idea that, once you hear it, is hard to forget. The breakaway civilization. Coined by author Richard Dolan, it refers to the notion that a small, elite group within the military-industrial complex, perhaps born from MJ-12, gained access to alien technology and used it to create a parallel, hidden civilization. One with off-planet capabilities, advanced propulsion, materials science, decades ahead of public knowledge. Imagine this. While the public watches NASA retire the shuttle, a secret fleet operates silently from underground hangars, orbiting satellites, even off-world installations. No congressional oversight, no public accounting, and absolutely no disclosure. Too wild to be true, perhaps, but consider this. If you stumbled upon functioning alien technology, would you hand it over to Congress? or would you bury it, study it, and build a secret empire from the shadows to the Senate? Fast forward to the 21st century. For the first time since Roswell, the US government began to publicly acknowledge UFOs, now called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. In 2020, the Pentagon created the UAP Task Force. In 2021, former military pilots like David Fravor and Ryan Graves testified before Congress, describing objects defying physics. But behind the hearings, another story was unfolding. In July 2023, David Grush, a former intelligence officer, told Congress under oath that the US had a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, and that he had spoken to over 40 individuals who confirmed it. Grush refused to name the programs on camera, citing security clearances. But behind closed doors, he whispered the same names researchers had heard for decades. Majestic, Aquarius, Magic. The room fell silent. 75 years later, the same shadows still moved behind the curtain. Pop culture and the weaponization of truth. But MJ-12 didn't just shape the intelligence community. It also colonized the imagination. In 1982, Steven Spielberg released ETA, a tender tale of an alien hiding from government agents, complete with hazmat suits and classified labs. In 1993, The X-Files exploded onto television. Its central narrative, a government conspiracy to hide the existence of extraterrestrials, and the agents brave or foolish enough to uncover it. Episode after episode, viewers were told, the truth is out there. And maybe more importantly, trust no one. Art imitates life, but sometimes life imitates art. Many insiders now believe that Hollywood was not just mirroring the MJ-12 mythos, but participating in a controlled narrative. Enter Project Mockingbird, a Cold War program that embedded CIA assets in major media organizations. Was the UFO storyline being shaped, even directed? Some argue the X-Files served as predictive programming, preparing the public to accept the truth slowly. Others believe it was a discrediting mechanism, mixing fact and fiction so thoroughly that no one could tell the difference. In this sense, Majestic 12 didn't just hide information, it weaponized it. Legacy of a lie or a legend? Let's return, for a moment, to the first page of the leaked MJ-12 documents. The tone is clinical, cold, bureaucratic, but between the lines is the echo of something unspeakable. An alien presence, recovered remains, technology that could reshape human history. Whether those papers were real, partial truths, or deliberate disinformation, they created a new narrative framework, one where secrets are inevitable, where the government may not be the final authority, and where a parallel truth just out of reach might explain everything. From Roswell to hearings on Capitol Hill, from grainy photos to congressional memos, from 12 men in a room to a global audience asking, what if it's all true? The quiet influence. Today, the name Majestic 12 rarely appears in official documents, but its ghost remains. In the language of whistleblowers, in the urgency of classified briefings, in the confusion between fact, fiction, and myth, it remains in the silence of agencies that won't answer questions, of documents that remain redacted, of secrets buried not just in vaults, but in narratives. The real legacy of Majestic 12 is this. It created a model of perfect secrecy, and a world where plausible deniability became policy. It taught intelligence agencies how to hide the truth in plain sight, to flood the field with noise, to protect programs not just with classification, but with absurdity. And so the story continues. Majestic 12 may have been real, Or it may have been smoke and mirrors. But either way, its blueprint endures. In the quiet whistleblower, in the black budget contractor, in the radar operator who saw something they can't explain, it endures. In the doubt, in the wonder, in the chilling possibility that we are not alone. And someone has known this all along. So dim the lights again, lean back, because the next time you look at the stars, ask yourself, if something really did crash in Roswell, who cleaned it up? And more importantly, where did it go? Chapter 8. The Reflection. Why the truth still matters. Even if Majestic 12 was a hoax, a fabrication, a planted myth, a Cold War relic, it forced open a door that may never fully close again. Because it wasn't just about flying saucers or alien corpse. It was about something deeper, quieter, and far more human. Our need to know, to understand, to demand answers from those who claim to lead us. Secrecy in the name of security is nothing new, but secrecy that twists reality, that replaces the known with the unknowable, that asks people to trust blindly, without proof. That kind of secrecy becomes something else. Control. The cost of not knowing is not just the silence. It's the stories we lose, the technologies we never see, the futures we never get to build. In 2023 and 2024, the world heard something strange again. Not from desert ranchers or anonymous memos, but from intelligence officials, from former insiders, from men like David Grush. They said what many suspected, that there are programs, there are recoveries, that somewhere in the shadow of democracy, something ancient and alien is being studied, whether you believe them or not. One truth still lingers. A government that hides too much from its people eventually forgets who it was meant to serve. So maybe MJ-12 was fiction, but like all good fiction, it tells us something true, that the universe is vast, that we are small, and that perhaps, just perhaps, we are not alone. They say history is written by the victors, but sometimes it's erased by the powerful. If you've stayed with us this long, you're not just curious, you're searching. And that means you're part of something bigger, not a conspiracy, not a cult, but a quiet resistance, a refusal to accept. We'll tell you when you're ready. If this story moved you, if it made you question what's real and what's allowed, then you're exactly the kind of mind we need more of in the world. So, stay with us, subscribe, share this with someone who still believes in asking why. And if you know something, really know something, you know where to find us. Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever, it just waits for the right eyes to see it. Good night.